Sending data. Okay, greetings. This is Cork Graham, and today I have with me again retired Army Special Forces Brian Morris, author of the book The Green Beret Survival Guide. How you doing today, Brian? Good, man.
I'm doing good.
I mean, quite a situation we've been having for the last week, isn't it, in terms of all the conflict and the emotional, the heightened emotions within the country and actually within the world. I mean, it's ignited around the world. And the question is, what's really happening? And I wanted to have you on here, and we could talk back and forth based on our various experiences and talk about it from that point of view in terms of, through our lens of our life experiences, what is really happening here. And what do you think is happening? Give me a quick synopsis of what you see occurring, first of all, in the United States, and then, if we can, let's go out overseas to the UK, Australia, and all these other places that are heavily charged and running on this, I don't know what we would call it, kind of like this carpet ride of emotional angst about racism. And how do we define racism?
Yeah, it's never a boring day, is it, Cork? You know, you could look at this situation in a lot of different ways, but I've learned, it just seems like everything's always a false alarm. People say, and I'm listening to some of the people that are talking now, and they're like, hey, do you think this is the one? Is this the one that's going to cause some sort of bifurcation in the way that we do things in this country? Or, is this the one that's going to make, absolute change for people that want to see change? And I don't know. I would say personally, I don't feel like the shit has actually hit the fan yet in this country, but I definitely think that the shit and the fan are in the same room.
Yeah, and the question is, we look at what's happening, and from our both backgrounds, we have a very solid background in counterinsurgency, and we were just talking about that. And that's you've mainly had yours dealing with Islamists, and mine I mainly had dealing with communists in Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and other countries in Latin America. And from our experiences, what are the commonalities we're seeing in terms of, first one that hits me is just the coordination and making the separation between those who are actually rightfully protesting about what's happening. What happened with law enforcement in Minneapolis was wrong. It never should have happened. There's no question about that. And every American has that right, and every free democracy has that right to go out and protest, make your word be heard to society. But what's happened is, from my point of view, is that piggy banking on top of this and using this, because this is so coordinated, you can't do this without a level of financing and direction. And that's the key. It's the coordination and the financing on this. And I'd like to have you talk about that a little bit further.
Yeah, this isn't an Axis and Allies situation. If you think about it, things were a lot simpler back during World War II. You had the Nazis, and you had the Allies. And anybody that sided with the Nazis, that was the Axis, and they were, we looked at them as evil, and it was black and white, and at least for most people, of course, there's always that gray area, and there's always things that soak into other things, but for the most part, it was black and white. And now you're looking at more like, I think back to things like Bosnia or things like that, where you had multiple factions. Anytime you had more than two sides to anything, it gets very confusing. And I think that was my biggest issue with the way that this all started out. I mean, first you got COVID, and everybody is, it was hard for me because I really did look at it as a pandemic. I looked at it as a global health crisis where, social distancing was an important thing. And I preached that to my children, to my wife. We tried to practice being safe and quarantining ourselves and things like that, and just trying to be responsible citizens. But then on a dime, everybody, it's like, oh, COVID's over, we're out protesting, and suddenly that's okay, and anything I was doing just seems completely voided out. So like, I have to ask myself, at what point did that whole thing become so political? And it just seems totally political now. It seems like, almost without doubt, the more conservative you are, the more skeptical you are about COVID, and the more liberal you are, the more you're wanting. And then I have to look at, like, what are the ulterior motives? Who's going to benefit the most from these different types of situations? Like, for instance, quarantine. If we have to go to an absentee ballot, or to actually them coming up, which I don't think they'll ever come up with a system this quickly where people could just get online and vote. But I do see them using the absentee ballot on a much more wide scale for people that don't want to, come out of their house, that want social distance. And I see so many possible issues with that. Not only that, but statistically, you can look at that as an advantage to the Democrats. It always has been. Anytime people don't have to actually go show their ID and vote, it's been an advantage to the Democrats, and vice versa for the Republicans. So, I have to look at that. I mean, you just got to look at motive. It's like being a cop almost, where you got to follow the motive, regardless of what your brain's telling you is the case, because sometimes things are not as they appear, And so that was the first thing for me, was to decide what I was going to not to fall for the sizing. Are you switching up?
No, we're still on. Yeah, I can see it. Yep. I'm just getting some other information right now. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm pulling it up. So keep on talking.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. So. Yeah. So my family chose that we were going to look at this as a health crisis, not trap. Well, because we're erring on the side of caution, right? It's not going to hurt to wear PPE and social distance. In fact, it's been kind of nice. I'm not a big fan of people in the first, so I'm kind of, I'm more of a hermit anyway, and being able to stay home on property has been a godsend for me. So, it's unfortunate that so many people lost their lives, but I look at that demographic of people, and I can understand why we haven't reached the fulcrum point with this disease, to where people are taking it more serious. And when I say the fulcrum point, I mean how many people literally have to die, and of what demographic, before people give a shit about it. And that's unfortunate, that's the case, but it is, whether we want to admit that that's the way it is in this country or not. You're looking at a disease that affects the elderly and minorities, who are two of the most marginalized people in the country, or groups of people. And because of that, it's difficult for us to get to a point where people are like, okay, that person's life means something. I'm going to distance myself from other people just to make sure, even though if I'm just a carrier, that older person doesn't lose their life because their immune, their immune system is.
Well,
is
one of the things about this, that I'd like to talk about is how this benefits strategically people who hate the United States, or against the United States. They absolutely hate Trump, and it's like you and I have talked about this. It's like we look at the president. The president of the United States is the president of the United States. Go ahead.
I really do think, I don't buy into the conspiracy theory that somebody started this on purpose, but I do look at it as somebody utilized. And when I say somebody, I mean a lot of people. We have enemies everywhere, as you know. And I think that our enemies are, without a doubt, 100% taking advantage of the vulnerable position that we have found ourselves in as a country. When all commerce stops, when you lose, more jobs than we've lost since the Great Depression, have been lost from COVID-19. Now, whether COVID-19 itself was a real thing or not, whether it was truly as much of a threat as it was made out to be, regardless, the bottom line is that our economy has pretty much stopped. You know, I mean,
in contrast to what it was before. That's the key operative word, is the contrast to what it was before. And how does that happen? And I've been trained through my life experience to never trust a coincidence, ever. When it's something, I mean, how many hits have you had within the last 2 months? I mean, 3 hits within the last 3 months. Crazy. You know, we got COVID, we got the economy, and now we've got this racial unrest, and this is hit all over. Every one of them is hit around the world. This is what's nuts about this. It's hit around the world. And,
yeah, and the question is this, you know, it's almost like a game of, okay, I'm prepared for this, you're not. We're both going to hold our breath, but I'm pretty sure you're going to breathe in the poison gas first. You know, and that's what it's come down to. Yeah, it's hit the whole world, but we weren't ready for it the way we should have been. And I think that there's other parts of this world, like look at China. You know, it started in China. They've already recovered from this thing, you know, and have less cases than we do.
I don't agree with, because I don't trust anything that comes out of China, and specifically how the statistics are coming out.
Okay.
But we know by the intelligence we're able to get, I mean, publicly, you're able to get all this information. It's amazing that anybody who's got a connection to the internet actually has the ability to be more effective than it seems like a lot of people who are in military intelligence, that takes them, 2 months to come up with an analysis that anybody who spent about an hour on the internet could have come up with within a week of what was occurring in China, which is, first of all, they're lying about their statistics. Secondly, they're lying about their statistics in order to stay in power. And thirdly, they're doing everything they can to even the playing field, because what happened was they were hit hard. They were working on a bioweapon. The bioweapon got at it. Well, that's another question we got to find out. Was it actually accidentally released into the environment, or was it actively released into the environment? Because if I was sick and twisted like a lot of these Maoists, and I'm going all the way back to my memories of the Pathet Lao, and not the Pathet Lao, excuse me, the Khmer Rouge, with the Khmer Rouge and how they killed so many of their own people, and that was just to make sure that they didn't have too many people who needed to be fed. And if you look at what was happening in China as a result of what Trump was doing in terms of the economy, which is, instead of just throwing all our money to them, not only were we sending in, at least from the last record I've got, at least $300 million in for economic development from our own State Department, but also the money that they were getting from us buying all the products that were being, quote, bought cheaply using Chinese slave labor, and a society and a government that has no respect for the environment. So it's like they're more than willing to poison all the rivers. You know, the Yangtze River is going to turn into a desert, you know, in terms of their food sources. So you think about that. Plus they had the issues with the pigs. Look, I mean, think about all that stuff that was happening at that point. Then we get hit by the COVID because they flat out lied to us. You know, we had 400,000 people coming in directly from China. And that was specifically to spread the disease. And once it got in here, it also got in northern Italy. And that was through the fashion industry, because of how many people that they had working over there. And now you've got this situation where we've got this next third round. And are we saying that there's no racist, there aren't any racist attacks by people in law enforcement? You know, no, we're not saying that, because we know that they happen. They consistently happen. The thing about it is, when did they get the opportunity to jump on this and ride with it? And it was for two things, and that's what I find just appalling, is what's happening with the media right now. Before the media understood, if you became a newsman, I started as a newsman, so it's like I went with the idea, I'm going to go find out the facts. I was going to go to Southeast Asia, and I was going to find out what happened to the American MIAs who disappeared, you know, during the Vietnam War. I was going to find, because that was the big story right there, and I felt compelling because of my childhood of being raised in Vietnam. To go from that to what I see now, where it's actively being used on whatever side in order to either take down the president or cause major unrest, emotional conflict within people that they feel compelled to go out and not only go and talk and protest, you know, legally, but also go out and start looting. And these are the people who are just going in and they're just using this as an opportunity. And they're the useful idiots for the people who are the enemies of the United States. I mean, flat out enemies of the United States.
Yeah, I'd have to just say I probably disagree with with the, how black and white you would paint that when you say they, because
so what
I
do you
really
mean? Okay, well,
like I was saying earlier,
that's a great question.
there
That's
are
a great question. What do you mean by
let
they
me
when
just
I
tell you,
say they?
I
What do
think
you
there's
think I'm saying
multiple
when I say
factions
they?
here. Well, I think you're talking about the protesters, and you're saying that the protesters are necessarily you're lumping them in with the rioters and
No,
the,
I'm not doing. No.
for lack of a
I'm
better
not doing
term.
that. No, that's why I'm saying the protesters have a legal right in the United States to go and do what they're doing peacefully. But when they get into violence and looting and basically murdering people, trying to defend their stores, they're no longer protesters. Now they're insurgents.
Again, you're saying they, and I think here's my take on it. Okay, so you've got the 1960s era hippies that are now probably 80% of anyone who is anyone in academia.
Yeah.
And also in the Democratic Party. Okay? And then you've got, on the flip side, you have people that that are much more nationalistic, probably more like myself, I'd say, more of a patriot, like yourself, don't necessarily have such a fundamental or a rainbows and flowers and lollipop kind of a view of the way the world is, the way it should be, or the whole idea of, let's just say, like redistribution of wealth, healthcare for everyone, everybody gets a participation trophy. Let's just put it that way, right? So that's a group of people right there, right? Then you've got the people like us, right? That are a little bit more conservative. But then you've also got these extreme factions on both sides, and that's where things get really confusing, because you've got anarchists, white supremacists, you've got Antifa, you've got Black Lives Matter, and then you have within those organizations, there's even spectrums and people that are on different ends of that spectrum. So, it gets really confusing because there's so many like and so many different objectives that each one of these groups has. And so there are definitely common denominators in these groups that makes it really, really confusing, because when two groups that are completely different want the same outcome for different reasons, it gets really confusing. And if you look at it like this, if you've got a guy that is a white supremacist, let's say, right? And for him, rabble rousing and creating chaos and making it look like it's the people that are trying to peacefully protest, or getting them so worked up. And me and you both have studied group think before and understand how that works, and you can get out there and have a peaceful crowd. It doesn't take a lot to go from a peaceful crowd to a rioting, looting group of maniacs that are not really thinking about any consequence for anything that they do. It doesn't take a lot, especially when emotions are involved. And when emotions are high and you get somebody out there that starts egging these people on, forget about it. And then if you start talking about some of the drugs some of these kids are taking these days, it doesn't help the situation at all. Okay? So, these situations can get heated really quickly, but at the will of the person that's doing it. Sometimes they're being manipulated from outside groups that have a desire for the same outcome, but for a totally different reason. So it's hard to pick sides, is what I'm saying. I can't look at it and say, okay, so is President Trump completely innocent? No. He needs to get off his damn tweet. I mean, if you look at the things that Trump has done since he became president, he did a lot of good things for this country if he just kept his mouth shut. The problem always comes with that damn Twitter account. I don't know who his handler is, but it scares me to think that he lives in such a vacuum that there's not one person in his life that can snatch his damn Twitter from him, you know, and tell him, hey, get the hell off your phone.
Well, it's kind of like he's
you know,
well, he's got a specific audience in that Twitter, and that's the thing. I think he feeds into it, but this is just my personal observation. But it seems like he feeds off of it. And that's from both sides. It's, you know, the charge side of the left and the right, but the key, just like you're saying, it's like this is one of the copies. I mean, we've got your book up right now, and I'd highly recommend for people, just for their own safety, you know, get a copy of the Green Beret Survival Guide by Brian Morris over at Amazon. It's available on Kindle and also in paperback. And but here's a book that I've reread again, and I'm rereading again right now, and it just blows me away. This book became a very hot topic during Obama's administration, especially how Hillary Clinton had written a paper, a thesis, back when she was at Wellesley about Saul Alinsky, and I read that paper. I mean, it's still available. You know, she tried to silence it and get it withdrawn from public access when she was running for presidency. But when you read that book and then you compare it to the other books, you know, that all of us who were fighting communism were required to read, especially, you know, like in Central America and Latin America and others, you know, previously in Vietnam, like Mao's Red Book, and then, you know, Che Guevara's Green Book, and then you had the Brazilian, what's his name, Mengele who was a communist guerrilla in Brazil back in the 60s, and written their book, the Guerrilla Handbook, I think it was called. All these books are set up for radicals, and it's interesting that, you know, Saul Alinsky, you know, he came to public fame back in '72 because Playboy magazine did an interview. And it's interesting that if you, back in the 70s, especially in the early 70s, if you got interviewed by Playboy magazine, that meant that you had a status. You then went into another status that made you palatable to the middle class. And it's interesting because when you read Rules for Radicals, it's all about working within the system. And this is what I find extremely intimidating about what's happening now in the United States, is that in every state where we've got these hot spots, these hot zones of people looting, not just a straight protest, but I mean when they're allowed to just go on and burn and flip police vehicles over, steal weapons out of those police vehicles, burn common citizens' homes. Every one of those states and every one of those cities has either got a mayor or a governor who's a Democrat. And the problem with the Democratic Party, and this is the thing, I've got this thing going on right now. It's kind of like they hit you on either side. They either hit you from the black or someone of color with the Martin Luther ghost, or if you're white and you're a Democrat, they hit you with the John F. Kennedy ghost. In my view, well, and it's interesting because Martin Luther King was a Republican, because he understood well the understanding of the Democratic Party came from the slavers, and in my view, it's still the slavers' party. And the way they're doing it is keeping people on the dole, keeping people ignorant about the facts, and just using them as tools in order to get back into power. And it's all about power. And frankly, you know, if John F. Kennedy was still alive, you know, my dad was a Republican. I was raised basically Republican until he got fed up with the Republican Party, and then he became a libertarian. But I mean, when I was a kid, I had a John F. Kennedy haircut because everybody loved John F. Kennedy and his statement. You know, that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I mean, that was John F. Kennedy, and that was the Democratic Party, and people didn't really care. It wasn't as heightened. Can you imagine somebody saying something like that right now, but, it's either from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and just because they are from that other party, well, I'm going to totally ignore it. You contrast that with people who are all Americans, and the president at that time was John F. Kennedy, and he happened to be a Democratic Party member, and he represented the Democratic Party, and so that was going to be the presidency during that time. Everybody got back behind that president. Well, and now it's so charged, and it's charged because of the way they're working.
I agree with you, Cork. I agree with you 100%. And I think that one of the things that showcases what you're talking about, right? Think back to it like this, right? Back then, just like you said, you were a Republican, and your dad was a Republican, and then a Libertarian, but everybody loved John F. Kennedy, right?
Exactly.
You went out and got a John F. Kennedy haircut. Doesn't mean that you voted for every Democrat that ran for office. You just had some respect for the guy, right? For who he was, and for it. So, what is the difference between that and today? Is that, you know, back then we weren't even close to as polarized as we are right now. The problem is that right now we are so polarized that we automatically demonize the other side just because of who they are, just because of their party affiliation. Anything they say, we're going to say the opposite of, you know, and it goes both ways with that. And it's to a point where I really feel like, you know, it's a major problem for this country, man, that I don't know that we can come back from, because we have so many issues right now. When you look at the unemployment rate, when you look at the you know, the people that are polarized in this country, the numbers of people, it scares me when I think about this election that's coming up in November, because it really doesn't have a good outcome. If Trump wins, then the Democrats are going to do what they're doing right now with the civil rights type marches and stuff, right? All of a sudden, COVID-19 doesn't matter anymore. We're going to go out and march, right? And be two feet from each other, burn the city down. But the point is, right, you got all of a sudden, you've got people that are coming out of the woodworks to protest. You think those similar types of things or worse wouldn't happen if Trump won the presidency? You think those people don't have it in them to get out and, you know, just basically say, we're going to stop the economy. We're not going to work. The whole country's going to strike. You know, half the country. It's that polarized. And then on the flip side, you know, Trump is such an autocrat that I'm thinking if he loses, he's going to say it was foul play, or he's going to say that, you know, it's because people were allowed to use absentee ballots, and it was not. It was at a disadvantage for him, and it was that. Therefore, the election is not legitimate. You know, he's not going anywhere. So, like, who knows? It's not that I think he's going to do that. I just think it's in his wheelhouse. You know, there's a lot of crazy things that can happen right now, and we're at a time. I have always said, you know, I like my doctors, my lawyers, and my presidents to be boring. All right. I don't need excitement. I don't want to have to wonder what's going to happen at some majorly explosive intersection in our history. I want to be able to pretty much say, you know what? He's going to take the mature way out. He's going to try and mitigate this situation so that we can go on to live another day as a country without, you know, completely turning his back on our values, right? So you want to think that president has your best interests as a country at heart. That's why anytime we have had disputes in the past, what does the guy always do? If the Chad count is off, you know, at some point that guy is going to capitulate, or he's going to say, hey, you win, right? It's yours. Congratulations. I lost, you won. That has to happen at some point. And I always knew, I never had any doubt that anybody that was either president or running for president would have the maturity and the selflessness to do something like that for the betterment of the country. But when it comes to President Trump, and this is my issue with him, I just don't know what he's going to do. I don't know if he's going to do the things that please his base, or is he going to do the things that are best for every American, regardless of their political views? Because it almost seems like, you know, to call people that are from a different party than you terrorists, or to insinuate that. I don't know that he necessarily said that specifically, and I don't want to start rumors, but I do think that that was the you know, the heart of what he was saying. That was the spirit.
Well, when he's talking about terrorists, I mean, in my view, he's specifically talking about. Well, my view about that with terrorists is he's specifically talking about the people who are looting and assaulting people, burglarizing, you know, and murder. I mean, that's there. I mean, that's as flat out, and that is terrorism. That's flat out terrorism.
No doubt about it. Those people go, man, and they need to go. I don't care what party they're in, or if they're. I don't care what they are, man. I don't care if it was because they were just caught up in the moment, or that they were paid by the other party to do it, or that they're the very extreme wing of that particular party that's protesting that's doing it. I don't care. It's the act itself that is terroristic, and those people should fry.
And that's all he's talking about. That's the only reason you have a military. That's the only thing. That's the only reason under the Insurrection Act of 1807 that you would bring the military in order to deal with something like this, is because the citizens are unable to be protected by the local government. That's what that's all about.
My question is, why are so many of his supporters, speaking eloquently and common sensely, in a common sense manner about this, and yet he never does? That's the question. It's like it's more about, it's not so much that I can't see the justification for it, because I can, and I can see the precedence for it because it's happened in the past. But it's more about the way that it's presented. It's it's like a really nice meal on a shit platter. You know what I mean? It just it takes something away from it, and I just feel like, I just wonder what his actual intentions are with that. And that's really like I said, man. I have a lot of respect for a lot of his policies, and I think that he did some really good things. I don't agree with all his foreign policy moves, but I do agree with a lot of them, and a lot of stuff on at least prior to shutting down the government and shutting down the economy, we were doing really well, money wise. So, I don't want to seem like I'm a never Trumper kind of guy here. Definitely there are things about the administration and about Trump himself that I like, but my biggest issue is I just don't know what's going to happen next, and I don't feel comfortable when the people that run this great superpower of ours don't themselves even know what they're going to do next. I mean, it's just that things just seem very random.
I mean, that's one of the things that's just amazing. And my biggest concern is how the economy is going to go, and it's the questions. I mean, you and I have had talks about that, where it's like, we started as an agrarian society on an agrarian economy back, the creation of this country back in 1776. Then we went in the 1800s. We went towards an industrial society, an industrial economy, and then about 20 years ago, we were going towards a service economy, basically just like the UK, and all the industrial economy society had moved over to China. And as a result of that, we've got a situation where I think we're actually going to flip back with what's happening with the economy right now, where you notice like ranchers and farmers have gotten fed up of losing money, taking them over to the corporate slaughterhouses and just selling them directly to local citizens in the area. And they've actually been making more money. These farmers and ranchers have been making more money going back to an agrarian style society, an economy where you're selling within 50 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles, or, like one person I know on my Facebook who basically said, hey, we'll go get a truck. And they got a truck, and they drove this truck all the way from, I think it was in Nebraska to Idaho, full of live pigs, and then they slaughtered the pigs in Idaho, and they got an incredible price per pound on that pork. And so here we've got the situation, where we're going into an economy that has just been hammered, which was doing really well, under at the start with Trump, and then suddenly, again, these coincidences. First, we get the disease that nobody really understands, but everybody freaks out from. People have already been heavily affected emotionally, heightened in terms of how they respond, instead of just like looking at things and say, okay, how do we respond to this? How will I personally react to this situation? Instead of it's like, oh, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. And then we have questions about Fauci and his direction of the NIH, and my big questions about how he, from what I've studied, is that he signed off on $5 million from the NIH that went directly to the Wuhan lab where the COVID-19 was designed, under her direction, and also in coordination with the PLA, bioweapon specialists from from the People's Liberation Army of China, i.e. the CCP. So here we've got, as far as I'm concerned, it's like we've had a Pearl Harbor, and we haven't responded, I think, appropriately to an attack that's killed more people in the United States than Vietnam did, during the war for U.S. Servicemen. Then you've got the situation where we've got the lockdown as a result of that has hit the economy. And now you've got the situation where, okay, suddenly, it's okay to go and protest and demonstrate, stay away from each other, and people aren't staying away from each other. And it is a real disease. I mean, if you look at the stats, the accurate stats, it is a disease that is hitting people. It's hitting a specific demographic right now, but it's continuing to change, and people are dying from it. And my big question is, are they trying to create more chaos in this country by what's going to happen after all these protests and all these looters and murderers and burglars, running on top of each other, definitely touching each other, and communicating this COVID-19, the CCP virus, to more people. And then we get the second wave. We haven't gotten the second wave the way China has, and China's done a major lockdown on it back there. And their economy's not going to come back. Our economy's not going to come back. Europe, look what's happening. The only thing that's really happening with Europe is they're, depending on what country, it's just like you got Sweden. Sweden's saying, oh, this is, we don't have to lock down, people just keep their space. And so now they have more cases of, not just cases, they've had more deaths related to COVID-19 than Norway, which is, 3 times as big as Sweden in terms of population. So you've got these conflicts, and people are in confusion. And what is the best army to use if you want them to be your minions? And that's flat out of Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, is you use an impassioned group of people who can be easily led through their emotions. And here you've got these people who are well-trained. Obama taught, as a social work, he taught from Rules for Radicals. Clinton was a mentoree of Saul Alinsky, Hillary was, and she wrote a paper on him, so, and I've read, when you read the paper, it's like she totally idolizes the guy, it's just, what's that?
Absolutely. I'll correct you on something, by the way. I'm not, I know you think because I retired in 2012 that I'm part of the post-communist, generation. But the fact is, I actually joined the Army in 1986, into the Cold War. And I do have a pretty good understanding of socialism and the way that, and not to mention some other jobs that I had in the military that opened my eyes up to Zelensky.
So tell me about your understanding of Zelensky. I really want to hear what's your viewpoint of Saul Alinsky. And he's got Rules for Radicals, but right in 1946, he wrote a book called Reveille for Radicals.
I'm going to explain. I'm going to tell you. Here's what it is. It's that anytime you're looking at socialism on a small scale, it's not a bad thing. You're talking about, when you talk about like a commune or people coming together for the common good or the good of all, or it takes a village. Whatever you want to call it, when you're looking at it on a very small scale, you're not talking about a horrible thing. I think of like a kibbutz in Israel.
Yeah, that's totally different.
That's basically like
at all. Yeah.
But hear me out though, right? Because in their mind, they think fundamentally. And when I say they, I mean just that people in that genre of people that believe that this is the way forward, or have always thought that this is the way that this country should be going. They see it that way though. They see it as a very pure thing.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
The fact is that numbers corrupt. And that's the issue.
Oh, what's corrupt?
When you start talking about any type of a society, that numbers corrupt. The more people you have in an organization, the more of an elite there's going to be, because everybody can't be in charge.
Exactly.
And it takes that's why they call us an experiment in our country. The fact that we have the Senate,
Yep.
and Congress, and then we have the executive branch, and everybody is an equal branch of government. The reason that we have that is exactly so that what happens in a communist country won't happen here, you know. And what's happening is that the very fiber of this that holds this country together as a republic is being undermined by people that don't want us to have the rights that we have. They want us to go to more this totalitarian, authoritarian, you know, I don't even think, I wouldn't call it, you know, anything that they want is not what it's going to turn into. We would turn into the next USSR.
Exactly, and that's the thing about it, because if you look at what the USSR was in contrast to what Lenin envisioned, that's why anybody who studied him says, you know, Stalin and his group basically assassinated Lenin, because Lenin had this idealism and Stalin had this, hey man, I've got control over this. It's just like in Nicaragua. The people who are fighting for the people in Nicaragua against Somoza were not the people who came into power. I mean, if you looked at who Daniel Ortega, who by the way is the president right now, again, you know, he got in because Fidel Castro helped him in, you know, got him back in. But it's just the idea that it's like the people who fight these wars, these guerrilla wars and these radical wars, 9 times out of 10, they are never the people who come into power, and it's these people come right out of the shadows and they go, who the hell is this? And boom, they're either the premier, they're the president, they're the, you know, totalitarian ruler. And that's the most terrifying aspect of this. That's what's so unique about the United States, is that, you know, we started off with the guy who was fighting at General Washington became President Washington. That's actually pretty unique.
Yeah, you're right. It is. And I'll even give props to Castro, who I think was a horrible human being, but at least he got out there and fought for what he believed in. Usually, the people that are doing the most dangerous fighting are not the ones that end up in power. At the end of the day, become marginalized, like you know, like soldiers often do, and then, you know, those that are in power are going to just basically, they're going to put that person back in a glass box and say, don't break until the next war, because, you know, the power is usually fought for by one person and then held on to by another. And the way that they do that, you know, they're pretty smart about it. I mean, they look at things, generally communists in general, look at things on a much longer scale than everybody else, you know? So they can look at it and say, you know what, we're not going to be able to do this, but if we can take over the education system, we can teach the youth that this is the way things should be. And then eventually everybody's going to die, and the youth are going to be here, and they will inherit the earth, and things will be the way that we want it to be right now. You know, so they're looking at things on a 3-4 generation scale, when the rest of the world is looking at things, you know, sometimes on a 3 or 4 year scale.
And the way they're running this, and this is the reason, you know, I brought up Rules for Radicals, is the idea of how Saul Alinsky talked about working within the system. Because he was, you know, as you read the book, you realize he was actually against the demonstrating and the looting and like the weathermen. You know, we don't have the weathermen right now, but I guess the closest thing would be Antifa. But, you know, the weathermen who were going out and bombing police departments. And
I grew up in Nanuet, New York. I grew up in Nanuet, New York. Do you know where that is?
That's where the weathermen were hitting
Well, the mall there. That's where the Brinks robbery was.
Yeah. Yep. And that's actually what led to the arrest of a few. And the thing about Saul Alinsky was against that, and it's interesting because when it's been brought up with Obama and Clinton, they were talking about it actually from the point of view of trying to dissuade and separate Obama and Hillary Clinton from Saul Alinsky, and actually bring it closer to the Tea Party, quote, the Republican Tea Party, and how copies of that book have been handed out. But that'd be like me saying, hey, have you read Rules for Radicals? And then I hand it to you just so you know the enemy. And that's the thing about it. It's the idea that using the system, so Saul Alinsky was heavily into, forget demonstrating out in the streets. It's like, you know, trying, you know, get through college, get a position, get into Congress, get into these places. And this is the reason that I'm terrified about what's happening right now. Is the idea that it's a coordinated effort. It's a coordinated
why are so
effort.
many of our most why are so many of our most left-leaning politicians also
Exactly.
attorneys?
Why is that? Well, tell me.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, obviously, because the more you understand the law, the more you're able to coordinate or to
Exactly.
manipulate it into your favor.
Exactly.
The more you're able to work
Yep.
within the confines of the
Yep.
law, if you understand it.
So it's like, more
You know?
people who be like pro would go in the military. So it's interesting that those who are like pro-American, red, white, and blue do their time in service and go into the military. And if they become lawyers later, that's fine. And then they go into office. But now it's like in the left, it's like go straight to college, get even more indoctrinated by these other instructors who are, graduates of the 60s, and get even more indoctrinated in university, get
Right.
your law degree, get your social degree in social studies and sociology, and then from there go further in and then go and get a position, starting off as a mayor or going to city council and then working your way up and then getting into a point where, boom, suddenly you're the president of the United States in the last term. And create, I mean, when you think about it, it's like, did we have the level of racial conflict in previous administrations? Sure, we did. I mean, we had the Rodney King riots during Bush Senior, but it didn't get to the level that it was during Obama when we had that. We had the things happening in Missouri again. And it's a situation where it's just like taking, as what's his name, Rahm was talking about, never let a point of conflict or chaos go to waste. And which is interesting because it's kind of like the Chinese mentality.
Yeah, right. Hey, let me say this, man. Let me say this. I think that's actually that's a great statement, and it's unfortunate, really, that's the way that it is in this country. And I'll give you an example, and that is, it seems like every time something happens of significance, it's hijacked by one side or the other as a platform for whatever their talking points are.
Yeah.
In general, right? So when COVID-19 happened, all of a sudden I start hearing all these talking points that prior to COVID-19 had nothing to do with COVID-19, right? When people are talking about healthcare for all and a base allowance or a base paycheck or salary that they want to give every American, regardless of if you work or not. I mean, those are very communist things. Let's just throw that word out there. And on top of that, when they were only spoken when from the most left leaning of the leftists that are out there, but all of a sudden they just found a way to connect it to COVID, and now they found a way to connect it to police brutality, and it just seems like it's the same people, the same argument, the same goals, and the same anger and frustration and emotion that I'm seeing on the left. I'm seeing in all these protesters, and it's making me wonder. What it does is it takes away, first of all, from the sanctity of life and from the fact that cop was fucked up. He should have never done that.
Yeah.
He should have known better.
He'd been reprimanded 18 times already for the last 20 years. Yeah.
Underpaid and friggin' not trained well. That's the bottom line. He's obviously, his training level was substandard. To let that happen for as long as it did.
And that's why the ones that I held responsible for his actions.
The bottom line is that we don't need people to protest because we don't need change. There's already a judicial system in place to deal with that, and you can sit here and you could scream and be pissed all day and tell me that there's all this social injustice in the world. But when you want to look at the actual statistics in the United States of America, the number of Afro-American males that have been beaten by the police without provocation and without resistance to arrest is infinitesimally smaller than what it's being made out to be right now by the left. You would think that a black person has to hide in their house because they can't walk on the street.
That's what they make it look like. If that was the case, why would we see everybody outside?
And you know for a fact that is not the case. Yeah, it's not the case. But again,
exactly,
it's a vehicle. They hijack these issues, and they use it as a vehicle for their. Basically, they're using everybody else and their problems as rungs in the ladder to their own advancement, and basically walking on us as rungs in their ladder to success. Because you just took away from that dude's life. You just turned him into a meme. Basically. Where that officer should have been, because what's the truth, man? One of those officers, now I don't know all the facts, and I don't claim to, but I hate to see people judged by the court of public opinion. Let the guy have his day in court. Let all 4 of those cops have their day in court. Because, for all I know, one of them's been on the job for 3 days, and they told him, hey, grab this dude's feet when we take him down, and then you keep your eyes out and make sure that nobody comes and tries to hit us from behind. For all I know, that's all he was doing. He can't tell what the dude in the front's doing with his knee. He's supposed to be looking past security. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying maybe it's what happened. Let the guys have their day in court and explain what happened and why it happened, and let them be judged by 12. We are not in that courtroom, and we don't have all the facts, and you saw what you saw. That's it. There's other, things that happened before and after that video, and they all deserve to be fleshed out in a court of law. And our system works, man. It doesn't always work, and sometimes people don't get what they deserve.
Well, that's one of the major issues right now is the system. The system is being cut. It's basically been changed over. In my own experience with Discovery Channel, when I was in a lawsuit with them for 3 years, I never got a chance to get into a court to be judged by my 12 peers, and the reason is because if Discovery allowed that to happen, they would be brought up on charges from the federal government because everything would be public. The problem is I don't have the money base that Discovery Corporation has in order to basically keep my lawyers stuck in paperwork, and the only one who's making money and benefiting from this are the lawyers. And that's the situation that's created in our system right now, and that's actually, I think that's by design, because it's like, according to the Constitution, we're supposed to be able to have, a truly open system in terms of being able to be judged by peers. We don't even get that anymore, and that is creating chaos. If we look at Rules for Radicals, it's all about creating chaos, because if you can create the chaos and make the chaos so uncomfortable that now you're not just making it uncomfortable for the impoverished and the poor, you're actually making it uncomfortable and conflicting for the middle class, then you have change. This has happened in every insurgency. This is what flipped it over in Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, in El Salvador, things do not get going hard and heavy until the middle class gets involved. When the middle class gets involved, boom, suddenly the government changes. And that's what happened with the United States. What happened with Trump? He hit the middle class on a level that the left / the Democrats were not able to do. And that created change where they went and voted this time. Just like in Nicaragua, where it flipped over and you got Somoza out and suddenly you had the Sandinistas. And it almost happened and succeeded with the FMLN, but then when they started killing civilians and killing farmers for no reason, like the atrocity of that witness flipped me from a point that I was fed up of being a journalist, and I thought it was better to spend my time carrying a gun. It was because of the media not reporting what I brought back, because it didn't fit the agenda. The agenda was the government is killing civilians in El Salvador, and if it doesn't fit that agenda, i.e. the guerrillas are freaking massacring civilians, and it's an atrocity, and they're killing them for things that, the atrocity they have witnessed that wouldn't be, relayed back from San Salvador, was that a farmer had his arm cut off. The arm was cut off because the guerrillas said, they had come to him before and they said, if you don't stop picking coffee, we're going to do something bad. So they cut off his hand, and the reason is because if you keep on picking that coffee, it gets taxed, and those taxes will go and get more ammunition and weapons to be shot back at us, i.e. the FMLN. That's true. But the thing about it is, if you're fighting for the people, you don't commit these atrocities against the very people you say you're here to save. And this is the same situation we got right now with the looting in LA, and you got the looting in New York. Is they're destroying things.
And you could look at that and you could say that's the exact same reason that
exactly
the Afghanis tended and like that. Anytime that we offered them protection, you know, they were more likely to side with us than not. And that's how we were able to create, you know, the Afghan National Army, because one of the tactics that the Taliban would use, and Al Qaeda, as they were attached to the Taliban, in many cases, you know, they would go into a village and they would see a school for girls, you know, and that was something that was absolutely forbidden before 2001 when we invaded into Afghanistan. Before that, women couldn't go to school.
Not since the 70s.
You know, there was no, it just wasn't going to happen. And and they would go in there and they would either kill or disfigure, you know, and when I say disfigure, I mean like chop off hands, things like that, of every single girl in that school, you know, and that's how they would leave.
And so these are common tools used by these radicals, you know, and these insurgents. And the thing about it is, you know, there's no difference between going and beating somebody up, you know, as he's trying to protect his store in Dallas, you know, than someone who's like, you know, a teacher who's trying to defend her students, you know, and then she's killed. So what's the difference in this situation? Again, they're trying to create chaos, and the whole idea is to show, hey, you know, the government isn't in charge, and if you want something better, you got to get this government out. And the worst thing about what's happening, I mean, you're seeing it with this leadership in Minneapolis, you're seeing it with the leadership in Seattle. They're all Democrats, they're all leftists, and they're standing back. They're calling the cops and getting their cops to stand back to let these instigators piggyback on the legal protesting and to create chaos, and then to come back. So it's like, hey, you know, it's like, it's not our fault. You know, we're not the one who are in charging these people.
Let me flip that idea on its head for you, though. Okay. So you look at let's look at the press, right? You know, freedom of the press. I think people have forgotten how important that is in this country, and what it can lead to if we don't have a free press that can report and be a watchdog on the government. And you look just in the last 3+ years in how demonized the press has become, how delegitimized they become, to a point where when you hear fake news, I mean, that has stuck like peanut butter, man. I mean, like, you know, crazy glue. And it's almost to the point where, you know, you can almost guarantee, like when I watch, I automatically, even subconsciously, I think the press is, you know, taking it a liberal stance on just about everything. It seems like. And then I watch Fox News and I feel like I'm watching the Donald Trump channel. You know, so it's really, really hard now, at least for me, to decipher what's real news and what's not, what's fake news, because everybody has taken a political stance, and that is very dangerous to the republic. You know, if you look at our founders, thought the press was important. Obviously, they wouldn't, it wouldn't be in our Constitution if it wasn't important. And yet, we have marginalized them to a point where, you know, pretty much whatever they say, you can turn it around and say, oh, well, they just don't like me, or they don't like my party.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword on that.
Regardless of what party you come from. And I think there is a double-edged sword, you know, and where it may be good for Donald Trump right now, I don't think it's good for the country, because, you know, where are we going to be 10 years from now if we no longer have the press to, you know, to keep an eye on what's going on in this country.
Well, one of the things that we got an issue with is, you know, I've been talking about the book, The Fourth Turning, and according to that book, we're getting into a situation with The Fourth Turning where it's going to be ending in 2025, and if you look at it, that would basically be the next term. I mean, that would be the beginning of the next term of or actually the end of the second term of Trump, if he gets back in, that would be a totally different country, in terms of where is it going to go? Because it'd be interesting to see what would happen with Trump in terms of whether he goes through the second term and whether he's able to go over and carry it through to someone who will take over for him within that party. And it's unlikely, because things are just so polarized, and we were having this pendulum swing right now, that really started during the Clinton administration, and then it was swinging back and forth, getting into Bush Jr. and then getting into Obama, and then now we're into Trump. And it's kind of like, the way I was describing it with Obama when he came in, I said that's President Carter on steroids. Now we've got Trump on steroids. I mean, we've got President Reagan on steroids, and how far can you get at such extremes on something like that? And we've got some major questions from the citizens about what to do with this. Yeah, where are you going to go with this?
Did you just compare Trump to Reagan?
Yeah, on steroids, because the things he's doing are, what Reagan would have done if he was going to just push it that much further. Just in the same way that Obama did things that Carter did, but that much further, and the effects of that. It's kind of like, and depends on who you talk to. It's like they love Carter and they love Obama. Like, oh, well, it's so many these great things. And then it's like, people who love Reagan, a lot of them love, Trump. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, he got to do things that, Reagan could not have done back then. So what does that mean for the country in terms of what we're dealing with right now, which is major chaos, and it's chaos that's being, aided by the media. And when I talk about the media, it's a situation. What is it about the media on the higher level that leads towards this? And it's the idea they've again, it's pain pleasure. They've realized, hey, if I can sensationalize things, I'm going to have people stuck, watching the tube. It's kind of like, the gawkers who look at train wrecks and car crashes. They say, oh, I got to watch. I don't like what I'm seeing, but I got to watch. So they focus on that, something that's going to emotionally stir them up, more so than something that might be beneficial to understand, which is, oh, by the way, while all this was happening, did you know that the economy was not that bad? And that's actually why Wall Street just spiked. So you've got this flip over where everybody thought it was going to be totally in the tank, and it's flipped over. But then a situation's occurring where you've got LA, you've got a mayor who's like kneeling and going down with the idea of like, oh, well, I'm part of you, and we're just, all together, kumbaya. And it's not. It's just like we've got this major conflict that's been instigated, and it continued to be inflamed, by the powers that be. And the question is towards whose power is shift. In the same way that the Chinese would never allow something like this in their own country.
Well, it really depends on who he's taking a knee with. If you're a politician and you want to take a knee with people that are legally and peacefully protesting and voicing their opinions without hurting anybody, their right to assemble, their right to voice their opinion, I support it. I'll fight for it. I don't have a problem with that, honestly. If he's taking a knee of solidarity with people that are rioting and looting and committing crimes, I think that's wrong. So let me start by saying that. And then the second thing I'd say is that where I agree with you that the media definitely has an agenda, I would disagree that it's just the Democrats. I really think that
absolutely. No, I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
It's really hard.
And that's the thing that's so charged up about it. It's just like, yeah, take for example, so Brian, take for example here. It's like, I came out with this book, Make Them Pay. I came out with it a few years back, when I was looking at some consulting gigs over in Eastern Europe and in the Baltics, because basically they had a situation right there that they were having to deal with the possibility that the Russians would come in and take over. And one of the things I talked about in that book was this image right here. And this image right here is basically the famous whoops, wrong one. This image right here, this is the famous execution of the Colonel Vo.
Okay.
Yeah, back in Vietnam when I was a kid. I was living there at the time. I mean, this happened when I was living in Saigon back in '68. You know, and the thing about it is Eddie Adams, when he came out with this book, with this photograph.
Right?
What's that?
Wasn't that?
That was during the Tet Offensive. That was during the first Tet
Right?
Offensive.
I can't remember.
There was the May Offensive and the original February Tet. And the thing about it was how this was interpreted. And basically, this is the picture that I hold as what really just got the ball rolling in terms of the emotional impact on the American people in terms of dealing with the war. Because militarily, the war was basically won by this time period in 1968. And one of the worst things that could have ever happened with the Tet Offensive was that it occurred because North Vietnam and the Viet Cong basically blew all their supply, they blew everything in order to achieve this. And psychologically, that's where the success was. It wasn't the idea of how effective they were, and that was shown during the May Offensive that occurred, and actually that was actually more bloody than the first Tet Offensive of 1968. And you compare that, the emotional, aspect of that in comparison to this image. So you've got this and you've got that. And so again, it's media going back and forth in terms of inciting the public, in terms of where they're going to go, what are you going to think? And this is some pretty, screwed up stuff where you've got the media who's benefiting from this because they're getting a bunch of advertising sales because they benefited already by the COVID. Because think about that. People are going out of their minds, they're stuck at home, and they're watching a bunch more news. So all this stuff is happening, and you've got situations where everybody is, dealing with the emotional stirring impact of all this.
Hey, it all comes down to the same thing at the end of the day. Green. It all comes down.
And who's benefiting from that? And that's one of the biggest things to think about. Who's benefiting from this? Who is going to benefit from this in the end?
All of the elitists. And when I say elitists, I'm not just talking about rich people. I'm talking
very
about powerful people. It's not so much. I have no problem with the generation of wealth. I wish I could generate some more wealth. I mean, that's part of the American dream. Being able to get rich,
to have that opportunity.
And not have to work taxing the hell out
but
of
if the socialists get in here in the way they've done in other countries, that opportunity will be gone because you won't be allowed to make and do what you want because it'll be in conflict with someone else. This whole idea. This is the thing that's terrifying about it. Is this? Globalism is not good. It's proven to not be good. Every time that globalism has come into a country, it has subjugated that country. And the United States has actually been pretty lucky in not becoming truly globalist, like countries like in the European Union. I mean, that's a global situation right now, and who's being affected by that?
Look at
Why did that happen?
I mean, obviously, because they realize that globalism is bullshit.
Yeah, and that's because we're a tribal people. And this is the thing that people don't get. We're tribal.
What does that mean? Redistribution of wealth basically means redistribution of wealth means you can work hard, I can work harder. However I come into my money is my business, but really it's not, because what you're saying is that I have to share my money with everybody, regardless of how they did or did not obtain their own wealth, that everybody has to have the equal amount. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be an elite class that has more than you. And that's where the people that are they want to impose these equality laws on us, laws that they're not themselves going to live. And if you want an example of that, just go take a look at the health care plan of Congress, because it's a whole lot better than the one they wanted to give the rest of the country. And I mean, the bottom line is they're going to take care of themselves, and they're the ones that are going to have, and the have-nots are going to be everybody else, because they're going to make it so hard to make it in this country anymore that people are just going to choose to go to other places. There's a reason so many people moved to Alaska where you're living, because at least they make it easy for people that want to live.
Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you one thing that I kind of a friend of mine told me, which I found really interesting. It was just like it's about population. And I mean, it's a real dark thing I'm going to say right now, and that is that he was coming up from Michigan, and he said, the reason I moved to Alaska, from Michigan, is that I was looking for a place where I would run out of people before I ran out of ammo. Think about that. I mean, he moved up to Alaska because he was thinking, shoot, man, if a civil war starts in this country, and that's one of the things, I mean, we're getting close to, or we're past the hour. So I want to start really closing up this in terms of where do you see us going? Because we've had some heavy duty talks that they're kind of depressing, in terms of civil war, and you've been hinting at it. I've been hinting about it, but it's just the idea. I think this is what we're seeing in the looting. And I'm not talking about the looting, which just happens. I'm talking about the coordinated attacks and coordinated looting where you've got scouts on bicycles. It's as it was analyzed in New York City by their counterterrorism specialist for New York City, who said that basically it was already set up. They had their scouts on bicycles, and they were actively directing the rioters and the looters towards areas that had fewer cops in that area. But also, this is the thing about it, they're bringing their own cameramen with them. And then they'll take this footage, and then they'll get it to the different outlets, and that's what we end up seeing. Well, nobody's questioning about who's actually taking these videos. And they're all about to incite.
Yeah, no, they're definitely they're controlling the narrative. There's no doubt about it. And if you're gonna ask me where I see us headed, I really think that we're at a very, very decisive point in our history right now. It's almost becoming cliche to say that because we have so many of these events that seem to fire up the country. But I really think that it's almost the perfect storm right now because of the quarantine, because of the fact that so many people are out of work right now. What do they say about idle time? It's what, the devil's playground or something like that. There's so many people out of work. They got nothing better to do than to get out and protest. And then you have these factions, these groups of people that are out there firing these groups up and basically making them the minions of their narrative. So whatever these small fraction groups want to see, they're able to control and manipulate these giant groups of protesters and basically take over the narrative so that it's about what it started off at. And I think we're in a dangerous time right now. I think the fulcrum point is going to be in November at the elections, and we're going to just have to wait and see, because I'll tell you right now, man, like I said, I don't think the shit's hit the fan yet, but it's definitely in the same room as the fan. And I'm personally, I'm counting my beans and bullets. I'll be honest with you, man. I'm not going to get into details about it, but I have instructed those that I love and that are closest to me to, start coming up with contingency plans for all different possibilities for our future, because it's not what, we are not by any means infallible. We're not a nation that can never fall. The Romans fell. We can fall.
I mean, and this is one of the things. Man. It's like I'm blown away.
Doesn't take much.
I'm blown away by myself in terms of my training, because my training, normally I'd go and blast a few rounds. I got my range, in my backyard. I mean, I can do rifle, I can do pistol, I can do everything right there, shotgun. But now I'm finding myself doing more and more dry firing exercises, which is good anyway. But I'm doing that because I don't want to blow my ammo. That I've never thought about that in that frame of mind before, and now I am. And it's just like, especially the first thing that was starting to go out in terms of supply was the toilet paper. Remember at the beginning of the CCP virus, and then right after that was ammo again. It's getting interesting.
Hey, let me say this, man. I would be amiss if, as I operate Knuckle Dragger Survival School of Self-Reliance, and if it wasn't for that, I think I wouldn't worry about it, but I feel like I need to say this. So here's what I did. I used this whole COVID experience as a way to test my systems. Let's just put it that way, right? So I think everybody should do that, and if you take, we teach a very simple philosophy. It's basically 8, 4, and 4, right? So food, water, shelter, security, communications, health, land navigation, and fire building. Those are the 8 pillars that we teach in our school. And then we put that up against a PACE plan, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And everything is based on KISS, right? So keep it simple, stupid. And what I do is I basically just looked at all my systems and I saw, okay, you know, what's my system for water? You know, okay, let's just say it's my well and using my water pump. But if that goes out, I have to have an alternate, a contingency, and an emergency means of having water for my family and for my house. So, like, go through all those systems, you know, and make sure this is the time. You know, I'll tell you right now, I did not have a shortage of toilet paper, but I did have other things. I'm not gonna telegraph my weaknesses and tell you what they are, but there were things within my systems that did not work the way I thought they would, and I had to make adjustments. So you can get something good out of this experience by putting all your systems up to the test and seeing which ones failed, which ones did well during this time. And, you know, it could be so much as just, hey, if I get locked in my house for 6 months, I need a better means of entertainment. You know, I need to have a bigger TV, whatever it is, you know, whatever you come up with that's going to make you more comfortable. Make sure that if nothing else, during this crisis, you figured those things out. Because to be honest with you, I really feel like this is small beans, man. This was just like a test run for what our future is about to look like. I don't want to sound dark, be a pessimist, or the bearer of, you know, doomsday type speak or Armageddon, but I don't see a bright future if we continue on the glide path that we're on.
So we're gonna close out, but I know we're gonna come back to this pretty soon, maybe even next week. Depends on if I take the boat across, and I might get away from society for a little bit. But what's your website for people to come and follow you, and also your Twitter feeds and Facebook, and if you got a YouTube channel?
Yeah, Knuckle Dragger Survival. Knuckle Dragger Survival. KNUCKLE DRAGGER So knuckledraggersurvival.com is my website. Knuckle Dragger Survival. You can find us. Just by Googling it. It'll get you right to the website. You can look that up anywhere you want. I also, you know, I write the Green Beret series of books. So I have the Green Beret Survival Guide out right now. Green Beret Pocket Guide came out in 2014, and I'm currently working on the Green Beret.
And where are they available?
Self-reliance, and that's going to be
where are your books available?
Say again. Yeah, you can get them at you know, any bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. I don't know. I think Barnes & Noble might be going under, I heard. So I don't know what the deal is with them, but you can just go ahead and get on Amazon and pick one up there.
So that's go ahead.
Green Beret Survival Guide. It's a good book, and it's got a lot of good information in it, including, you know, what to do if you find yourself in a riot, you know, which is these days more and more possible with the amount of people that are out protesting. A protest is just, you know, hop, skip, and a jump away from a riot, man. It just takes the right group of circumstances to come together in the right way, and boom, it can turn into a powder keg quickly. So understanding how to read groups of people and know when the time is the right time to get the hell out of there is really important, especially for people that, because of their work, may find themselves right in the middle of those types of situations. You know, we take those people for granted a lot of times. People that by no, like, for instance, we started calling all these people heroes that are doing like you know, Uber or they're delivering food to your house. You know, that's just because they have a job that somehow that's an essential job. You know, I mean, to me, the only essential jobs are the people working in hospitals. But, you know, we're in a society where those people tend to be marginalized, and they're going to find themselves sometimes caught in the middle of something that they don't understand. So giving them the tools to survive is important to me. People that wouldn't otherwise have them and would find themselves out of happenstance to be right in the middle of bad situations. But there's also people like reporters or people that work in the medical field or first responders, you know, police officers, anything like that, I think would get something from my book. But also people that travel and just anybody that wants to stay safe or understand how to be prepared and how to mitigate risk.
Fantastic. And that's
so check it out.
Yep.
Green Beret,
the Green Beret Survival Guide. And please go visit over at knuckledraggersurvival.com. And also, if you want to get another point of view of what's happening in terms of what's happening here, but it's actually an older book that I had written for the Baltic region in terms of defending against the larger invader, which actually it incorporates the understanding of what's happening with in using an insurgency and also demonstrations. I wrote that book a while back, Make Them Pay. That would be a good read. And then also, if you would, please come on over to YouTube. That's one of the best ways to be assured of getting every new episode. And I'll be also releasing videos over there that won't be available on the Facebook channel, which is over there at YouTube. So go over to YouTube, and the name of the channel is Treasure Quest Snake Island, The Real Story. So just type in Treasure Quest Snake Island, The Real Story, and you'll see that there are a bunch of other episodes. This is actually episode 21, as I recall. Yes, it's no, actually this is 20. So this is episode 20, and you'll see all the previous episodes that go way back for about 3 years right now, and we're just adding on to them. So again, please subscribe over at YouTube at Treasure Quest Snake Island, The Real Story. And also you can follow me at Twitter. My Twitter handle is Cork Graham. This is first name, last name. Charlie Oscar Romeo Kilo Golf Romeo Alpha Hotel Alpha Mike. Again, that's Cork Graham at Facebook for my author official page. And then there's the Twitter handle, which is Cork Graham. And again, over to YouTube at Treasure Quest Snake Island, The Real Story. And thank you very much, Brian, and we'll be talking soon.